was a regular Saturday afternoon, and I found myself at the mall. You know, the usual stuff. Folks shopping, kids running around, that annoying muzak playing in the background. I was just minding my own business when I saw this guy. He looked all messed up, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He had wild eyes, and his clothes were all torn and dirty. He was clutching something in his hand, something I could barely make out. But as he got closer, it became clear. It was a gun, a big one. Panic started to creep in, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, like a deer in headlights. And then, it all went to hell. The guy with the gun started screaming, and people around me began to panic. They pushed and shoved, trying to escape. I saw a kid get separated from his mom, and the look of terror on his face. I can't forget it. People were getting hurt, not just from the crazy guy, but from the stampede too. It was like a nightmare, and the screams, oh God, the screams, they still haunt my dreams. It was like everyone was trying to get out at the same time, and it was chaos. I finally snapped out of it and started running, just like everyone else. The guy was still screaming, and he fired the gun, and I heard the sound of glass shattering. I didn't look back. I just ran for my life. I managed to find an emergency exit, and when I got outside, I saw police cars and ambulances rushing towards the mall. It was pure madness. People were crying, and I saw a few folks with blood on them. It was the worst day of my life. But here's the scariest part. When the police finally got inside the mall, they found the guy with the gun. He had taken his own life. I couldn't believe it. He was so close to me. I don't know why he did what he did, but it still gives me chills. I ain't no writer, and I can't describe the terror I felt that day. I'll never forget it, and I hope I never have to experience anything like it again. Thanks for listening. I gotta get this off my chest. It happened at the mall, a place you'd never think something like this could go down. It was just an ordinary day, you know, window shopping, grabbing a quick bite to eat, and watching people hustle and bustle. The mall was packed. I was checking out a new phone in the electronics store when I heard it. A loud noise, like a bang, and then people screaming. I rushed out to see what was going on, and there he was, this guy with a gun. He was waving it around, shouting something that didn't make sense. People screamed and fled in every direction. It was like a stampede. I saw kids separated from their parents, and people tripping and falling. It was chaos. But what sent shivers down my spine was when he grabbed a few folks and dragged them into a store, holding them hostage. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like a nightmare unfolding right before my eyes. The man was out of his mind, and he was threatening to hurt those people if anyone tried to stop him. I hid behind a pillar, trying to stay out of sight, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I watched the police arrive and surround the mall. They were talking to the guy on some kind of loudspeaker, trying to negotiate with him. I was terrified for those hostages, but I couldn't do anything to help. The mall was in lockdown, and time seemed to stand still. I heard sirens and helicopters circling above, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Inside, the guy was still shouting, and I could see him waving the gun around. It was a nightmare, and I just wanted it to end. Hours passed, and it felt like an eternity. The police kept talking to the man, trying to calm him down. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, He seemed to be getting tired, and he started to talk to the police. I couldn't hear the words, but it looked like he was finally listening. Then, suddenly, he dropped the gun and raised his hands. The hostages were released, and they rushed out. It was a mix of relief and fear. I couldn't believe it was over. The police arrested the guy, and I finally let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It was a horrifying day that I'll never forget. You'd never expect something like this to happen at a mall, but it did. I was in the mall that day, just minding my own business, you know. It was a regular day, nothing out of the ordinary. I was browsing through some clothes at the department store when I suddenly heard a loud bang. It was so deafening, like a firecracker, but I knew something was off. People started screaming, and that's when I turned around and saw it. There was this guy, looking all disheveled and crazy. He was waving a gun around, and it wasn't one of those fake-looking ones. It was the real deal. My heart was pounding, and I froze for a moment, not knowing what to do. I hid behind a clothing rack and peeked out to see what was happening. The guy was yelling something, but I couldn't make out the words. I could see the terror in people's faces as they ran for their lives. Some knocked over displays and tripped in their haste to escape. I saw him approach a group of people who were trying to get away. He didn't care who he was hurting. He just kept firing that gun. It was chaos, with people crying, screaming, and shouting for help. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing, and I felt helpless. I knew I had to get out of there, but I had to be careful. I couldn't risk running out in the open and catching that guy's attention. So I stayed low and made my way towards the exit, sticking to the shadows as much as I could. As I got closer to the exit, I heard sirens approaching. Thank God for the police, I thought to myself. Maybe they could put an end to this nightmare. But I knew I had to be cautious. I didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. The police stormed into the mall, their guns drawn. It was like something out of a movie. They yelled at the guy to drop his weapon, but he just kept on shouting and waving the gun around. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his eyes were wild and filled with madness. I stayed hidden, peering out to watch what was happening. The police seemed to be trying to negotiate with him, but it was clear that he wasn't listening. He was determined to go down fighting, it seemed. Then it happened. One of the police officers took a shot. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the mall, and it was followed by a burst of gunfire from the other officers. The man with the gun fell to the ground, and the chaos finally came to an end. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. The mall, which had been so full of life and laughter just moments ago, was now a scene of devastation. People were crying, some were injured, and others were in shock. The police rushed to secure the area, making sure there were no other threats. I finally came out from my hiding spot, and I felt a mix of relief and horror. I couldn't stop shaking. I made my way to the exit and stepped out into the daylight, blinking as if I had just emerged from a terrible nightmare. It was a day I would never forget. The fear, the chaos, and the violence were etched into my memory. It's something that you see in movies or hear about on the news, but you never think it could happen to you. But that day, in that mall, I experienced the unimaginable.